In the Middle Ages, taking a bath was far from refreshing. Water sources were often contaminated with waste from both humans and animals. Bathhouses reused the same water for multiple people, turning tubs into breeding grounds for bacteria and parasites. Physicians of the era believed that warm water opened the pores, letting bad air and disease seep into the body. Ironically, in their attempt to stay clean, many individuals exposed themselves to infections such as skin diseases, dysentery, or even plague. For nobles, perfumes and dry cleaning methods like rubbing with cloth were often considered safer than submerging in filthy water. Thus, something we consider healthy today could be a slow invitation to death in medieval times. Public bathhouses were popular social centers, but beneath the laughter and chatter lurked danger. The same bathwater might serve dozens of bathers before being changed. Without knowledge of germs, medieval people had no idea that microscopic killers swam around them. Diseases like syphilis, leprosy, and tuberculosis found easy passage from one body to another. Moreover, bathhouses often doubled as brothels, adding sexual diseases to the mix. Religious leaders eventually declared public bathing sinful, linking it to lust and immorality. Ironically, abandoning baths didn't make people healthier. Dirt and lice brought their own risks. The medieval bath was less a sanctuary of cleansing and more a silent executioner. For many medieval townsfolk, the bathhouse wasn't a place of health, but of suspicion. At first, bathhouses were lively places where neighbors gossiped, merchants made deals, and travelers refreshed themselves. But as epidemics swept across Europe, the bathhouse gained a darker reputation. People began to notice that those who bathed often sometimes fell sick afterward. Physicians warned that hot baths weakened the body's defenses, opening pores to poisonous miasma. Religious authorities went further, condemning bathhouses as dens of lust and sin, since many doubled as brothels. To the pious, stepping inside meant risking both body and soul. Parents sometimes even warned children that the devil himself lurked in bath steam. Slowly, what was once a hub of social life became a place of whispers, scandal, and dread. Clean water was a luxury in the Middle Ages. Rivers carried sewage, dead animals, and industrial waste from tanneries and dye makers. Wells could be tainted by latrines dug too close, yet this very water was what people used to bathe. Immersing oneself meant contact with parasites, bacteria, and unknown toxins. Even nobles, who could afford private baths, weren't safe. Their water was often fetched from the same polluted sources. Boiling wasn't a common practice for bathing, so filth flowed freely. Worse still, bathhouses reused stagnant water all day. Instead of cleansing the body, it coated bathers in disease. In a world without soap as we know it, cleanliness could become a deadly illusion. Modern people associate bathing with health, but in medieval Europe, staying clean carried risks. Frequent bathing was believed to weaken the body, leaving it vulnerable to illness. Warm baths were thought to let dangerous air seep in through the pores. Worse still, in plague years, doctors warned against water altogether, claiming it spread infection, yet those who persisted often did themselves harm. Bathhouses passed on skin diseases and sexually transmitted infections. Sharing a tub meant sharing bacteria and parasites. Those who couldn't afford bathhouses sometimes bathed in public rivers where waste floated past. Ironically, the very effort to maintain hygiene exposed people to fatal risks. Cleanliness was not a cure, but a gamble with death. During the Middle Ages, fear of disease shaped daily life, and bathing often fell victim to suspicion. When plague swept across towns, many doctors and priests warned people to stop bathing altogether. They believed that hot water opened pores, making the body an easy target for poisonous air. In some places, city leaders even banned public baths, blaming them for spreading sickness. Ironically, these bans only worsened hygiene. Lice, fleas, and dirt built up on unwashed bodies, helping new diseases spread faster. Religious leaders also associated baths with sin, since bathhouses were often tied to immorality and prostitution. So while people thought they were protecting themselves spiritually and physically, they were often making conditions worse. Cleanliness became taboo. Dirt became normal, and diseases thrived in the shadows of fear. To bathe in medieval Europe was to risk more than a chill. It could be a slow death. Public baths were crowded, their water cloudy with the grime of dozens of bodies. Germs, though unknown at the time, thrived in this environment. Skin infections, parasites, and contagious fevers found easy passage from one bather to the next. Even the belief that bathing strengthened health backfired. Too much washing was thought to weaken the body's natural defenses. Worse still, some baths doubled as meeting spots for illicit pleasures, spreading sexually transmitted diseases. Many people noticed a grim pattern. Friends went in to cleanse themselves, only to fall ill days later. The baths, instead of a sanctuary, became a silent and patient executioner. Bathhouses were once seen as symbols of refinement, a way to imitate the luxurious habits of Romans. But as centuries passed, they gained a reputation for doom. The water inside was seldom fresh heated once, then used again and again. With each new bather, filth collected and sickness spread. Many bathhouses also doubled as brothels, where indulgence brought more than momentary pleasure. It carried the threat of syphilis, a disease with no cure. Priests thundered from pulpits that bathhouses were nests of sin. Meanwhile, ordinary people whispered about neighbors who bathed and later died. Slowly, the bathhouse became a place of both desire and dread, its steaming waters carrying whispers of death. Soap in medieval Europe wasn't like today's antibacterial barzit. It was often harsh, poorly made, and mixed with animal fat or lye. Some used herbs or ashes, but these did little against real germs. Bathing with this crude soap in dirty water only irritated the skin, leaving sores vulnerable to infection. Bathhouses reused tubs for multiple customers, and skin diseases like scabies, ringworm, or boils could spread rapidly. People thought they were scrubbing themselves clean, but in reality, they were stripping their skin's defenses. For the wealthy, scented oils masked odors but didn't kill bacteria. For the poor, river water served as both laundry and bath filthy, with waste and dead animals. In the end, what was meant to purify often poisoned, turning the act of washing into a dangerous ritual of sickness. In the Middle Ages, the line between hygiene and hazard was thin. Some physicians advised occasional bathing for health, while others warned it was dangerous. People believed warm water softened the body, allowing bad air or miasma to enter through the skin. Yet going unwashed caused its own dangers. Lice, fleas, and dirt spread plague and typhus. For nobles, perfumes and linen cloth rub-downs replaced risky baths, while peasants had little choice but to bathe in polluted rivers or public houses. Families often debated to wash or not to wash. The very thing that could cleanse you might just as easily kill you. For medieval Europeans, every dip into water was a gamble between survival and sickness. Water in medieval towns was rarely clean. Wells were tainted by nearby latrines, and rivers doubled as sewers. Drinking water was dangerous enough, bathing in it was worse. Many people associated water with illness, believing it carried invisible poisons. Doctors warned against submerging in rivers during plague years, claiming disease clung to damp skin. Religious leaders also discouraged bathing, linking nakedness in water to sinful temptation. Instead, people turned to dry cleaning methods, rubbing with cloth, powders, or simply covering odors with strong perfumes. Some even believed that dirt formed a protective barrier against disease. Thus, fear and superstition combined to keep many away from water, reinforcing the idea that bathing was less salvation and more silent curse. For many medieval people, bathing wasn't a refreshing cleanse, but an immersion in filth. In public bathhouses, dozens of bodies shared the same water, which grew cloudy with dirt, sweat, and oils. Parasites thrived in these warm, stagnant pools, making every soak a gamble. Diseases such as skin rashes, boils, or even leprosy spread silently from one bather to another. In rural areas, Peasants often bathed in rivers that carried sewage, animal carcasses, and industrial waste. The illusion of washing away dirt often meant coating oneself in invisible killers. Worse, the lack of knowledge about germs left people unable to connect their sickness to the filthy water they trusted. Bathing was meant to cleanse, but, in truth, it was slow poison. Medieval Europe was full of strange beliefs about hygiene. Some people thought dirt sealed the body against disease, while others believed bathing too often drained vital strength. Perfumes and powders were trusted more than water, masking odors instead of removing germs. Many even believed certain baths cured illness. Mineral baths, wine baths, or herbal steams, but in reality, these unsterile practices spread infections faster. The myth of protective dirt was especially deadly, as lice and fleas carried plague from one unwashed person to another. These cleanliness myths were more than harmless folklore. They shaped habits that exposed entire communities to deadly epidemics. Superstition, not science, ruled hygiene, and ignorance turned myths into killers. Every bucket of medieval water was a potential death sentence. Rivers carried waste from towns, mixing human filth with animal remains. Wells were easily contaminated by latrines or decaying matter, yet this water was still used for bathing. With every immersion, people risked contact with cholera, dysentery, or parasites. Doctors noticed patterns. Those who bathed often fell sick more quickly, but without understanding microbes. They blamed bad air or curses. For many, the connection between water and disease was undeniable, and yet necessity forced them to use it. Ironically, the very element essential for life became the carrier of death. In the Middle Ages, water wasn't cleansing, it was contaminated, lethal, and feared. To medieval Europeans, the pursuit of cleanliness was a paradox. While bathing was seen as a sign of refinement, it often led to disease. Public bathhouses filled with reused, murky water spread skin conditions and infections. Wealthy nobles who bathed frequently sometimes grew ill more often, leading doctors to argue that water weakened the body's defenses. They claimed open pores allowed miasma and evil humors to enter. In plague years, many were told that washing made them more vulnerable to the Black Death. Ironically, trying to stay clean often brought exposure to more germs than avoiding water altogether. Those who bathed for beauty or social reasons unknowingly risked their lives, turning a simple act of hygiene into a silent hazard. Bathing didn't just carry health risks, it carried spiritual suspicion. In the Dark Ages, church leaders denounced bathhouses as sinful places where lust and immorality thrived. To strip naked in public, even for washing, was seen as indecent. Many came to believe that frequent bathing was not only dangerous to the body, but also to the soul. Religious authorities declared that avoiding water was a form of piety, reinforcing the idea that cleanliness of spirit mattered more than cleanliness of flesh. Over time, bathing became a taboo act, associated with vanity, sin, and even heresy. What had once been an ordinary routine turned into a forbidden ritual that risked divine, as well as earthly punishment. Medieval bathhouse was a hub of social life, but also a breeding ground for sickness. Friends, merchants, and travelers all gathered to soak in the same pools. Steam filled the air, carrying odors and, unknowingly, disease. Skin ailments spread quickly, from boils to scabies. Some bathhouses even encouraged food, drink, and sexual indulgence within their walls, blurring the line between leisure and vice. These environments made it easy for sexually transmitted diseases, like syphilis, to spread unchecked. Doctors of the era warned that hot baths weakened the body, while priests warned of sin. Yet despite these warnings, many flocked to bathhouses, drawn by the promise of relaxation. For some, that warm soak was the last pleasure they ever enjoyed. Medieval cities were notoriously filthy, but sometimes the water was worse than the muck underfoot. Rivers that carried away sewage from households and butchers. Scraps were the same places where people fetched water to drink or bathe. Tanneries and dye works poured toxic chemicals into streams, turning them into deadly mixtures. Bathing in such water meant exposing skin to parasites, boils, and invisible killers. Even noble households, with their private tubs, relied on water carried from these sources. Unlike modern plumbing, there was no separation between waste and clean supply. In this way, baths became gateways for disease. People thought they were escaping filth, but in truth, they were soaking in a cocktail of death. In medieval Europe, myths about cleanliness often caused more harm than good. Some believed that washing too often drained the body of its strength. Others thought that dirt acted like a protective shield, keeping out plague or bad air. Still others trusted strange remedies, like wine baths or herbal steams that had little effect on real germs. These superstitions meant that many avoided true cleaning or relied on dangerous practices. Lice, fleas, and filth thrived on unwashed bodies, spreading deadly diseases across towns. Ironically, the very myths meant to protect people from illness often sealed their fate. Belief, not science, ruled hygiene. And those beliefs cost countless lives. Bathhouses weren't only about bathing day. Were social centers, places of ritual, gossip, and indulgence. Yet beneath the laughter, the rituals themselves were dangerous. Water was seldom changed, so a single tub could serve dozens. Patrons sometimes rubbed themselves with shared cloths or oils, unknowingly spreading infections. Food and drink were served in the steamy rooms, mixing pleasure with risk. Many bathhouses doubled as brothels, where ritual cleansing blended with carnal desire. The result was a hotspot of both sin and sickness. Religious authorities condemned these places, but many continued to visit, seduced by their warmth and company. The rituals of cleansing were less about health and more about habitat in the end.
They often cleansed nothing but life itself.
Hygiene in the Middle Ages was a fragile balance between custom and danger. Bathing was rare, and when it happened, it often involved polluted water from rivers or shared tubs in public houses. People used rough soaps made from animal fat and lye, which could irritate the skin and leave it vulnerable to infection. Clothes were not washed often, and undergarments were worn until they were full of lice. Instead of soap, some used powders, herbs, or vinegar rinses, which only masked dirt and smell. All of these practices created the perfect environment for disease to flourish. Parasites spread typhus, fleas carried plague, and dirty wounds festered. Hygiene in medieval Europe was less about health and more about survival, but their limited understanding made survival uncertain. Doctors of the Middle Ages were guided more by theory than by science. They believed in humors, miasma, and the idea that balance in the body determined health. To them, bathing was risky because hot water opened the pores, allowing poisonous air to seep in. Some even argued that frequent washing drained vital energy from the body. During outbreaks of plague, physicians often told people to avoid water entirely, insisting that it made them weaker. Ironically, this advice often doomed their patients, as lice and dirt spread disease unchecked. Instead of prescribing hygiene, they encouraged perfumes, oils, or simply staying dry in their effort to protect. Medieval doctors accidentally helped disease spread further. To the casual eye, medieval hygiene practices looked harmless. Powders, perfumes, occasional baths, and clean linen. Yet beneath these habits lurked hidden dangers. Powders could irritate the lungs. Perfumes masked filth without killing germs, and linen rubbed against unwashed skin only spread lice faster. Bathhouses, when visited, offered infected waters and shared spaces where parasites thrived. Even medical treatments like bloodletting before a bath left weakened bodies vulnerable to infection. What seemed like an effort at health often disguised risk. The real danger of medieval hygiene was not just dirt, but ignorance. People believed they were protecting themselves, when in fact they were opening the door to sickness and death. In medieval Europe, the church had immense influence over daily life, including ideas about cleanliness. Priests taught that inner purity mattered more than outer washing. Bathing, especially in public bathhouses, was often condemned as vanity or even sin. Some clergy argued that excessive concern with the body distracted from spiritual devotion. Because many bathhouses doubled as brothels, the act of bathing itself became associated with lust. As a result, the faithful often believed it was holier to stay dirty than to risk spiritual corruption. Dirt and odor became a badge of piety, while perfumes or powders masked the worst smells. Cleanliness, as we know it, was not linked to holiness. Instead, it was seen as worldly temptation. In a society ruled by religion, this belief shaped habits that left many vulnerable to disease. The bathhouse of the Middle Ages was a paradox, both comforting and deadly. People entered to relax, gossip, and wash away the grime of the streets.
But the steaming water, used by dozens before them, was thick with sweat, oil, and hidden disease.
Skin infections spread quickly in such environments, while sexual encounters added new risks, like syphilis. Physicians warned that hot water weakened defenses, and priests thundered against sinful indulgence. Still, people flocked to bathhouses, clinging to moments of warmth in cold winters. Many left feeling cleansed, but days later, sickness would set in. To bathe was to play with fate, a brief relief that could lead to a fatal price. In an age without knowledge of germs, shared bathwater became a silent killer. A tub might serve 10 or 20 people before it was emptied. With every new bather, more sweat, sores, and dirt joined the mix. Diseases like dysentery, scabies, and tuberculosis spread invisibly through this stagnant water. Children and the elderly, with weaker immune systems, were especially vulnerable. Even private baths weren't safe, as water often came from contaminated wells or rivers.
Some believed adding herbs or oils made water safer, but this was little more than superstition.
The truth was simple. Every soak carried invisible risks. Bathwater, intended to heal and refresh, often became the very medium of death. Without modern science, medieval people relied on hygiene hacks that often did more harm than good. Some rubbed themselves with vinegar, ashes, or even urine, believing these substances cleansed the body. Others carried Pomodoro's balls of herbs or spices, hoping the fragrance would ward off sickness. Perfumes were used to mask odors but didn't remove dirt or kill germs. Wealthier families might rub linen cloths over their bodies instead of bathing, thinking it removed In reality, these methods only irritated the skin or spread disease further. Worse still, people often reused cloths and powders within families, passing on lice and infections. These so-called remedies gave a false sense of security, while disease crept silently through homes and streets. What people thought of as clever solutions were, in fact, deadly tricks. To modern eyes, medieval bathing was shockingly unsanitary. Public baths were crowded, loud, and filled with murky water that might serve dozens before being replaced. Patrons often shared towels, soaps, and oils, perfect carriers for skin diseases and parasites. Bathhouses also encouraged eating, drinking, and even sexual encounters inside, blending entertainment with exposure to germs. Rivers used for bathing were polluted with waste, dead animals, and industrial runoff from tanneries. Even private baths, though more luxurious, drew water from these same sources. The illusion of cleanliness hid a deeper truth. Every bath was a brush with filth. In trying to wash away dirt, medieval people often soaked themselves in sickness instead. Over time, bathing in Europe became not just dangerous, but taboo. Religious leaders linked public baths with sin, lust, and immorality, declaring that true purity was spiritual, not physical. Physicians added their warnings, claiming that frequent bathing weakened the body and invited disease. Together, these beliefs created a culture where dirt was accepted, even respected, while bathing was suspicious. Those who did wash risked both social judgment and sickness.
By the late Middle Ages, bathing was rare, and perfumes replaced water for many nobles.
Ironically, these taboos worsened the spread of lice, fleas, and plague. The very act of cleansing became feared, shaping centuries of deadly habits. For medieval Europeans, the choice between washing and staying dirty was not simple. Bathing often meant stepping into polluted rivers or public houses where dozens shared the same water. Each soak exposed people to infections, parasites, and deadly diseases. Doctors warned that hot water weakened the body, while priests condemned baths as sinful. Staying dirty, on the other hand, carried its own dangers. Lice, fleas, and filth spread plague and typhus. Yet for many, dirt felt safer than water. Nobles turned to perfumes, scented oils, and linen rub-downs instead of risking immersion. Peasants often skipped baths entirely, their daily lives filled with work that left little time for luxury. In the end, washing in the Middle Ages was a gamble. To bathe was to risk disease. To stay dirty was to risk infestation. For countless people, the safer option seemed to be the unwashed one. The irony of medieval life was stark. The very act that should have preserved health, bathing often brought death, while dirt became a strange kind of shield.